So they don't take advice, perspective, observation, criticism from anyone. Because in their minds, they're still living in the world which they had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when they were the fastest, the sharpest, the best person in the economy. Yet today, the ideas, the concepts, either doesn't have the same value it used to have, or nobody cares. There are people who sadly, in their minds, are still experiencing this locus of lunacy, where they will tell you, I am the face of entrepreneurship in Zimbabwe, I am the kingmaker of entrepreneurship in Zimbabwe. We are the ones who put this country on the map under entrepreneurship in Zimbabwe. Yet this happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's sad. So part of it is people need to be made to realize that times have changed, and now we're experiencing a different dispensation. So that's the thing on the entrepreneurship trend. What I want to share with you now is the third trend, which is the opportunity trend. So going on forward between now and 2022, our observation is that the opportunities that entrepreneurs in Zimbabwe must look at or be guided by will be inspired by a couple of things. The first one is misplacements. There are many Zimbabweans who are misplaced, especially in terms of their careers. So the path which they thought they were going to take when they were in primary, then high school, then after high school, is completely different. So a lot of Zimbabweans, sadly, are misplaced, career-wise. And for some, it has sadly pushed them into getting jobs that they never either studied for or wanted in their lives. So they are the type of entrepreneurs who they hate their bosses, they hate their jobs. And sadly, some of them, because of that kind of misplacement, ended up marrying the wrong people. So now they also hate their spouses or their exes. And this is a reality. So this is part of what then pushes them to start businesses, because they want to prove a point to either a particular person or a group of people. So this is a very important thing to watch for as you pursue opportunity. If it is because you are misplaced, it means you are emotionally aggravated. And it's one of the worst things for entrepreneurs. In the first world, yes, it works. You know the history about, especially those people in the tech industry, of how many of these college dropouts in America became very prominent because they were pushed to do something because of members of the opposite sex who disregarded them and said, you're an idiot of all the idiots that I know. So they got angry, got organized, and then pushed to prove a point. In Zimbabwe, I think it will be very tricky because our economy is struggling and society is very small. So this is part of the reason why you find people, when they start beginning to do well as entrepreneurs, when they make money off the business for the business, they take this money and then spend it on themselves. So the clothes, the cars, the houses, the travel, and just the idea of being spendthrift. People go to bars and drinking places and spend 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. You can't understand that. Some people, you were told, will have 17 SUVs in their car parks, and you just can't understand it. So part of it is this misplacement. So when people finally achieve, they are so emotionally aggravated that they have a shopping list of people they need to prove point to, either at family level, friendship level, church level, some even national level, we're told. So that's how bad things can become. So going on forward, just watch out for that in terms of how personally you may be misplaced, and this may be a wrong motive for you to push your business. The second thing under the opportunity trend is the realization that as an entrepreneur, part of what you need to accept is the reality of the day. In entrepreneurship thinking, they say the bus is not coming. Many entrepreneurs, they take too much time to accept that the bus is not coming. You must read the signs, the telltale signs. They're always there. Our study of the entrepreneurs in Zimbabwe who have fallen in the last decade or so, there's so many people within the organizations and outside who gave them signals and signs that the bus is not coming. Some entrepreneurs were so ambitious that they shared their vision to the nation and to the world as if this vision was prophecy. So they said in 5 years' time we'll be here, in 10 years' time we'll be here. And sadly, when 5 years came and 10 years came, nothing happened. Some actually then fell to the extent of now drowning in debt. Yet they just saw their vision as if it was prophecy. So that's just watch out for that. It's like some entrepreneur who will tell you that I'll be a millionaire by December. Then when December comes, they start disappearing from the social circles because everybody's asking, okay, you said you're going to be a millionaire, you're going to have a yacht in Monaco, you're going to be meeting the Queen of England. Where is that? And some said you will be told they've gone back to their parents' house somewhere. And that's how bad it is. If they declared in public that by December I'll be a millionaire. So it's something just to watch out for, that the bus is not coming. It's important to accept when a transaction or a venture or an initiative is failed. And that's very important. Because the more you move out of that cycle, the more you're wasting resources on a dead horse. So that will be important going on forward. So as part of your wiring, just be able to accept the signs that the bus is not coming. And that will be very important. And then the last thing there on the opportunity trend is the thinking around prioritization. The US dollar is a challenge in this economy. And one of the challenges for entrepreneurs every time is when you've got a plan of what you want to do to grow or build your business to become a better brand, the money that you get to do that isn't enough. So it's about decision making, but more of it is about thinking decision making. And you still see this in Zimbabwe. The little money that will come into the business will be taken by the owner to do his hideous or her hideous things. The workers aren't paid for so many months. The business doesn't have reinvestment. There's no working capital. And suppliers and other stakeholders have got issues. And so part of what you can't understand is you will think that, look, but there's this amount of money which came into the business. It's reflected in the bank account, but there's nothing on the ground. So going on forward, as an entrepreneur, it's important to also rethink your decision-making system, because we all prioritize different things. So some will argue that, look, I need to buy an SUV because it's good for my brand. I'm the CEO of my company and I go to meetings and networking and breakfast meetings. I need to look the part. Or I need to buy this type of clothing, whether it's Italian or French or whatever, because it's good for my brand. Others will spend thousands and thousands of money in setting up a high-profile interior office, corner office, fancy sofas, fancy TVs, because the argument is that those who are in technology will then buy a very expensive piece of ICT equipment, costing thousands and thousands. Again, this boils down to the issue of thinking decision-making, to say how do you prioritize? Because the money will never be enough. I'm sure many of you have seen interviews either of Patrice Motsepe, Aliko Dangote, Mark Zuckerberg, and Bill Gates. And part of what you realize is they will tell you that the money that they have, even if they're billionaires, is never enough because they want to do bigger and better things. But part of what has assisted them is to decide the system in which they decide what is a priority at a given time. So that will be important. I want to share with you now the fourth trend, which is about markets. One of the things which will be important going on forward for entrepreneurs is to actually understand the issue of markets. And part of what may assist there is the issue of branding. I know in Zimbabwe there's still a debate about the actual value of branding from a commercial perspective. Because as a nation, there's an argument that we aren't fully branded as a nation. It's something that has been left to perhaps the guys in tourism. But at national level, going on forward, it's something that we do look at as a nation. The top economies in the world, if you look at the trends that are shared by World Economic Forum and other platforms, have got a common shared national vision, which is known, which is simple, which is clear, which is embraced by most citizens. And in Zimbabwe, we don't have that. And we will need to do that. Because this will allow us to think about how we brand our country from a commercial perspective. And it will assist in deciding how the national resources will, in the medium to long term, be shared, either by the current generation or the next generation. One of the reasons why some economies perform best and are the top economies is because they've built a culture of entrepreneurship where they develop the next generation of entrepreneurs. So that's very important. And a lot of that has to do with branding. This is why some countries, as you know, they actually sent a lot of their top students to the top Ivy League colleges in the USA. Countries like China, Japan, Russia, South Korea. And in the last 10 years or so, it has paid dividends because many of the innovations and cutting-edge philosophies in commercial enterprise have come from these kind of countries, from students who have been sent going on forward like that. Again, under markets, is that for Zimbabweans who are entrepreneurs, part of what you may need to consider is to set up an agenda that you take outside Zimbabwe. Because the truth of the matter is this: there are some concepts in Zimbabwe which may be very brilliant, very interesting when you say them in words, but on the ground there's no uptake of any of these things because Zimbabweans will tell you, look, right now we are only keen on bread and butter issues. No sophistication, no creativity, no innovation. So some would rather fund or support cash cows. So if you're doing groceries or burgers or selling ice or mineral water, you will find uptake for your kind of initiative. But if you're talking about medium to long term, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 20 years, you may struggle to get partnership there. So again, the kind of thinking is to go outside Zimbabwe, perhaps set up something through partnerships, and then perhaps grow the brand there before you come back to Zimbabwe. And the point there is this: some of our citizens, they love this country so much that they would rather starve and struggle and shrivel in this economy because they love the country. Yet commercial enterprise has got nothing to do with this. You actually can be somebody who sets up an agenda, goes to a very foreign country, build your enterprise, commercialize it, make tons of money, then come back to reinvest. It's something we need to consider. I've met many entrepreneurs who will not leave Zimbabwe because they're saying we are at the core patriots of the motherland. And yet the market and the economy in this country probably will not be ready for their kind of ideas in the next 10 years. So those kind of people, effectively, they will eventually die from clinical depression. So thinking outside the box and far away from the box will be very important. I have some good friends of mine who are Zimbabweans. Some have set up in Taiwan, some in Singapore, some in Japan, some in the US, some in Nigeria, some in Kenya, some even in South Sudan. And the kind of monies they're making per month, they're ridiculous. Because they've gone to spaces where their concepts are required and there are people who are willing to pay for those ideas. But in Zimbabwe, they used to struggle for many years because perhaps the only platforms where they could access the kind of funding they wanted was through parastatals. And you know the headaches in parastatals in Zimbabwe. So that was an issue. The last thing in other markets I want to share is the thinking around private equity. A lot of what entrepreneurs in Zimbabwe need right now, or talk about right now, is working capital. Which is not bad because they want to survive in the short term. But in the medium to long term, something that entrepreneurs may need to consider is private equity. And being a public speaking specialist is something I have an eye on because 2 things will be required for this, as you know. The first thing is to be able to go and pitch your business case before people who have money for days. Not some of these pretenders you see in Zimbabwe who are not even recognized by Forbes. I'm talking about the real guys who have money for days. And these guys require you to come and pitch your business case. And then secondly, to ask you the scalability of your business concept, which is about the numbers. And we encourage entrepreneurs to pay attention to those 2 things. Sharpen themselves from a public speaking perspective so they're able to sell the business case. And then secondly, to understand the numbers on scalability. The illusion that gripped many entrepreneurs in the last 10 years was failure to do those 2 things. Failure to pitch the business case, and also failure to state the numbers. So people will be explaining how big a market is by using metaphors, like in the literature, to say we have vast mineral resources, we've got a top-edge human capital and friendly weather. Yeah, maybe at a cocktail, those words will mean something. But in the private equity space, those things don't mean a goddamn thing. Because people will then say, yes, we have got vast mineral resources, so what? We have got this number of resources, we're number 2, who gives a damn? So going on forward, our entrepreneurs need to look at that. Because you will be tested by what you're claiming to be. So the point there on markets is just strongly think about that. So whether you say I'm a visionary, I'm a trendsetter, I'm a strategist, I'm an atmosphere changer, fine. In a social setting, those things are very big. But in the private equity space, you'll be tested on exactly what you're claiming to be. And I'm sure you know many Zimbabwean entrepreneurs who have fallen in the last 10 years. We used to claim to be so many things. I know one gentleman who used to say, I am a money magnet, that's one. Another used to say, I am a commercial magician. Another one who has fallen recently also used to say, I'm a wealth witch doctor. It's part of their branding. And now 10, 15 years down the line, they've gone back to the rural areas, and that's how bad things have become. So the take-home point in their own markets is just be careful what you claim to be. Because in the private equity space, you'll be tested on exactly what you're claiming to be. Are we together? The last thing I want to share with you is this trend. And the trend is the trend of legacy. And our encouragement to entrepreneurs going on forward is to have generational thinking in their enterprises. The history of Zimbabwe, as you know, will tell you that the businesses that were built in the 70s collapsed in the 80s. Those built in the 80s collapsed in the 90s. Those built in the 90s collapsed in the early 2000s. And those built in the early 2000s have already collapsed. That's how bad it is. And the center of this is the issue of discipline. It's something that our entrepreneurs will need to take very seriously.